Okay, we are live with a special Between the Pages book chat where we're going to be talking about Dark Tides Book 7 Little Mutilations. And we have three guests today who all have novellas in this collection. And they are Jess Landry, Nadia Bulkin, and Sophia Ashram. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves now. So take it away. Jess, you go first.
Okay, sure. Hi, I'm Jess Landry. I'm a writer, director, living in Winnipeg, and yeah, I have a novella in here called "The Night Belongs to Us," and I'm excited to chat about it.
Okay, Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia Ashram. I am a writer slash metalist based in Montreal, and I also have a novella in this entitled Acid Bath about a clinical trial gone wrong.
Okay, and Nadia.
And I'm Nadia Bulkin. I'm a horror writer. I am based in Washington, D.C., and my novella in this is called Your Next Best American Girl and is set in the world of pageantry.
Okay, so we'll start out by asking everyone how they got involved in this book project.
Yeah,
Jess,
so it kind of started over here. I was approached by Joe Meinhardt at Crystal Lake Publishing when he was putting together the Dark Tide series. We are lucky number 7 for us, but at the time he emailed me and he was like, "Hey, I would love to include you in this," and he said, "I would love for you to pick 2 authors that you want to partner up with to make this book happen." And literally the first 2 people at the top of my list were Nadia and Sophia. And luckily they both said yes, and it kind of just went from there, and just this beautiful, horrible thing was born from all of our minds.
Okay, so you other two, when she contacted you, what'd you think?
I think you had reached out with body horror like immediately as the potential pairing to go with mystery. And I was like, I'm immediately in. I'm a huge body horror lover in film and in writing. And I feel like everything I write inadvertently or intentionally has body horror elements. So I was like, I got this.
I was scared, vice versa, because I don't write body horror. So I was like, oh, I really want to do this, but also like I am very nervous about this theme. But that's okay. I figured I could learn as take a chance on something new. It's always good.
Yeah.
For me, and just say like for approaching them, having worked with both of them as an editor in the capacity, working with Nadia on There Is No Death, There Are No Dead that I edited with Aaron J. French, and then with Sophia on a novel that they have in progress going on. It was like I knew that both of them could deliver and deliver spectacularly on body horror, even if it might have been a bit of an intimidating subject to get into.
Well, I'm going to assume that you all did a good job because you're here talking about it and they published you. So, give everybody an overview of what your book in the collection is about. We'll start with Jess.
Sure. Yeah. So mine's The Night Belongs to Us. It's about a woman named Laura who comes into an unfamiliar city looking for her mother. Her mother, unfortunately, has gone missing and has been missing before. She's kind of under the influence of drugs and alcohol. She more or less lives on the streets. And so Laura comes to town looking for her for the last time, kind of setting her foot down. And finally, splitting up from her mother, essentially. But along the way, she meets a woman named Cee, who is kind of this street hunter, we'll call her. She's part of this underground society that's called the Underground. And through all the twists and turns in the story, Laura discovers that Cee knows where her mother is, and that there's this sort of creature that's living underground, taking advantage of houseless women and in distress women. And it kind of spirals from there, but they form this nice little bond, and things get a little bloody and everyone has a good time, even though it's horrible. Thank you.
Okay, Sophia, tell us what your book's about.
So Acid Bath is about 2 friends that volunteer for a high-paying, high-risk clinical trial. One of them is doing it because she needs to, because she needs the finances, and then the other one's doing it because they want to and they want something exciting in their life. And the novella is kind of their relationship crumbling and unwinding as they're going through the trial, and like symptoms are starting to pop up and kind of weird, disturbing, like tied in news is happening, sort of like on TV that seems related to the trial that they're going through. And yeah, it's just kind of a meditation on the systems that exist that are at odds with community and friendship and love, and kind of work to destroy those things, I guess.
Okay, Nadia, tell us about your book.
So mine is Your Next Best American Girl, and it's about this pageant contestant who discovers one day that she has these sores coming out of her arm. And obviously, being a pageant contestant, this is not great. And so these sores just kind of get worse and worse, and she's trying to figure out what is causing them and if she is potentially being sabotaged by someone else that she is competing against or with, or something else.
Oh, that sounds intriguing. So, what inspired or influenced your novellas?
For me, it kind of ended up revolving a lot around the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement, which is very prevalent here in Canada, unfortunately. Unfortunately. So the story basically, it takes place in Winnipeg, which is where I'm from. And, you know, Winnipeg is we're a very racist city, even though nobody likes to admit it, and nobody, you know, would ever admit to it, honestly. And so there's a lot of people that kind of fall through the cracks here and end up on the streets and end up kind of being disregarded by society. I mean, that's not exactly unique to Winnipeg. I'm sure that happens a lot of other places, but here, because I'm here, I see it more frequently. And so kind of at the core of my story is that issue. Of course, it skirts a very, you know, respectful line, because that is such a heavy topic to deal with. But, you know, at the core of it, it is essentially about mothers and daughters and, you know, birth family versus found family.
Okay, Sophia, what influenced or inspired your book?
I had been writing a lot of stories that were centered around harvesting of like labor and data and emotional labor and sexual labor and all of these ways in which the body is kind of like taken away from ourselves. And I've had an interest in clinical trials for a long time, but I find it such a like obscure subject that's really kind of not talked about very often. And yeah, it just meant the like was created from a crux of an interest in those two things, where I was like, oh, I keep revisiting this topic, so there's something interesting there. And then I thought clinical trials was like a good medium to kind of unpack that subgenre.
Cool. So, Nadia, what influenced or inspired your book?
So for me, being newish to body horror, I wanted footholds. And so I really just kind of like centered on that angle of things. So I just kind of combined things that I knew, which were like trypophobia, which is fear of clustered holes, eczema, sort of, because I used to struggle with that. And I just figured, what would be a situation where these things would not be good? Like, cannot be dealt, you know, like really a big problem. And I just came up with the beauty industry. So I just kind of put together those things, and then kind of the mystery evolved naturally from the combination of those elements.
Okay, so did you use any themes throughout the narrative? I mean, what did you want to explore when you wrote the books?
Yeah, I think we all, well, we all definitely met the assignment with the body horror part. That's for sure. For me, like I said, themes of, mothers and daughters, loss of identity, loss of self, that's a big one. Um, just, tackling, kind of real life issues while adding this, crazy kind of supernatural element on top of it, and kind of culminating in this giant bloodbath at the end for mine anyway. Yeah, it really, like, I think for all of us, we all just kind of took the theme and ran with it, and it kind of made this wonderful little stew of body parts that we have here today.
Okay, what about the rest of you? Did you utilize any themes, or what did you want to explore when you wrote the book?
I kind of like touched on this before, but definitely looking at the like close friendship, and then as like one pillar, and I guess like capitalism and failing healthcare and big pharma and all these things as like an opposite pillar, and how self-preservation and loyalty and all these different elements can sort of like wear away at a close relationship. And it doesn't culminate in a bloodbath like Jess's, but it's like a little self-contained climax bloodbath that ends up happening. But yeah, a lot of thematics around just like loyalty and love as the opposite of capitalism and consumerism and all these systems that work to tear us apart.
So what about you, Nadia? Did you have any themes?
I think what's interesting is that we all came up with, there's some overlap in the things that we wrote about writ large. Like, I think we were all writing about social themes, relationships, connections, how the body is seen and interpreted and used by those outside the body, so I just think that was interesting, that we all kind of came up with variations on a higher meta level theme. I think for me, it was a lot about like perception of beauty and what women's beauty in particular is supposed to be. I titled all of my sections like names of paintings that had like the woman clothed in the sun, like that kind of thing, because it was all about like how women are seen kind of thing. So for me, it was a lot about that, and also just about competition and ambition and the sort of feeling of never being good enough. Yeah.
Okay, so Jess and Sophia mentioned that they've written body horror before, and you mentioned you haven't, Nadia.
Yes.
But so, how did you all approach the subgenre of body horror in your books? And did you enjoy writing? Do you enjoy writing this subgenre?
For me, I think if you look behind me, I never know which way to go here. I have these things, big fans. So already coming into that subgenre, being obsessed with The Thing and Hellraiser and movies like that, it was pretty simple. I mean, simple, like not easy, because nothing is easy, but simple enough to kind of get the grasp of what needed to be done and how to do it. And if I needed to look for inspiration, well, I just put on one of those movies and enjoy, because they are like the epitome of body horror, and they are wonderful.
Okay, what about you, the rest of you?
I mean, like I said, not having written body horror, I just kind of clung to what I already like knew, like the sort of like nightmares that I'd had about my body, and that was like how I had to like jump off from there. I think it's still not my preferred subject, but that's okay. I had good like coaches. I remember like Jess explicitly telling me to like go gorier, at one part. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll write some more descriptions. But yeah, I will probably leave it to the pros.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely a genre or like a subgenre that I'll continue writing in. And I don't know, it feeds off of such like in fear that I have of like the loss of body autonomy and just I don't know, my body being out of my control or utilized by someone else or something else. And the first point of reference that always comes to mind is Cronenberg, because like king of body horror. So I think whether or not intentional, there's a lot of sort of threads that like return to the one seed that is Cronenberg's work. So that was definitely a big like source of inspiration in terms of like visual aesthetic and like medicine as body horror and all these things.
I feel
Okay,
like that's
so
also a prerequisite too when you're Canadian, is that you have to you have to love David Cronenberg. You have to.
It's coming of age experience.
okay, yeah, Nadia mentioned touched on the gore and upping it or whatever. So so how much gore did you put in the novels? How did you decide the level, and did you leave some of it to the reader's imaginations?
For me, I think all gore is good within the frame of the story. Like, you don't necessarily need to go overboard and have everybody just drenched in blood and guts all the time. As long as it fits to the situation that you're writing to, then your story will kind of dictate to you how much should and shouldn't be in it. So for mine, it starts off pretty minimal. There's little bits of like, gory bits coming through feeding tubes for people to eat, kind of hinting that there's something else going on in the underground. And then it kind of culminates in, I called it a bloodbath, but really it's probably very tame by most standards. But there's just basically like a massacre at the end. And, you can be as descriptive as you want, but you can still leave a lot to the reader's imagination. And that's what I tried to do with mine too, is not necessarily go overboard, but have enough in there so that way, you get that there's a lot going on here right now.
Okay, so Sophia, did you go more along the psychological or straight up gore?
I definitely agree with Jess on a lot of points that she made. Just that story dictates kind of story beats and what should happen. Of course, like with the theme being body horror and mystery, you want to like weave in some of those elements so that it doesn't kind of fall apart. But just by proxy of it being about clinical trials, there's like different little elements that I can weave in, and hopefully it's gory enough. I feel like it's got its moments.
Okay, so Nadia, being new to the body horror genre, how far did you go with the gore, or did you feel comfortable with it?
I mean, like I said, like Jess had to push me a couple places. I think what Sophia said about like that this being kind of like a preoccupation due to like fears of like loss of bodily autonomy and that kind of thing was really interesting and made me think like I think I don't have as strong a connection to my body as like probably, I don't know, like normal. Like I'm also ace. It's like just like something I kind of am not connected to. So that's why I kind of had to latch on to the things that are like things that have stayed with me since childhood, like being able to like, dig into one's muscles and that kind of thing, and like the skin just like coming off. So I just kind of went with what I knew there. And that was fine, I think. And I think I had to, because of the context of a beauty pageant is all about like, objectification and being seen. So obviously like the visuals are going to be extremely important.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know what body horror is as a horror subgenre, give us your definition of it. What does it mean to you?
Ooh. Oh boy. Gonna repeat, I guess, bodily, not. I can't even say the word, you guys. Body. Well, you know what I'm trying to say. But yeah, it's like essentially the loss of your own body, having either some sort of exterior force or interior force kind of rip it to shreds. Not always so viscerally. Sometimes it is more psychologically too. So body horror really, you know, transcends a bunch of different mediums, a bunch of different subgenres as well within the subgenre, right? You can have so much like body horror. Yeah, there's Hellraiser and there's The Thing. There's also body horror like the movie American Mary, the first one that came to mind, where this woman is a surgical student and she, you know, something terrible happens to her and, you know, she starts to feel disconnected from her body and goes into kind of exacting her revenge through body modifications. And so there's a bunch of different sort of ways into it, I think, for me anyway.
Yeah, I would think sci-fi and medical horror would fit well as subgenres of the
Totally.
subgenre.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Sophia and Nadia, how would you describe body horror as as a genre if someone asked you?
I feel like Jess put it so like succinctly. Honestly, I mean, with my novella, I was talking a lot about like the loss of bodily autonomy, but I think it's much broader than that, and it can encompass a lot of like torture porn, even, and like all these different things that are just like splatterpunk, just over the top gore. As long as it's something that's happening to your body that's very gory and in a sense out of your control, or sort of like tumbles out of your control, even if it's something that starts intentionally. But I feel like it can be interpreted in so many different lenses, and that's what's always fun to see about it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like how I'd classify it, like just really broadly, is like any kind of horror where the main action happening or like the source of the horror is the body. So it could be anything where it's, I mean, it could be something that's like as radical as like parts of body turning into another thing, or it could be as subtle as like, I mean, there's a lot of like, I don't know, for instance, like indie movies like Swallow, that's about like a woman who's like ingesting, it's basically she has pica and it's like she's like swallowing objects. And then there's also one that was called Resurrection. I don't know if you guys saw that. Came out last year, I want to say. And that one involves a man who eats, well, I won't say, but there's a body horror element of it that is shocking. And but it's not your traditional, you never even see what's happening. It's all told off screen, but it's absolutely body horror. So yeah, there's just a wide range of what can be classed as body horror, I think. And I had to remind myself of that too.
Okay, so what do your characters struggle with in the books? What are they afraid of?
Everything, anything, all of the above. Yeah, for me, oh boy, for at least for the Laura character coming into the city to find her mother, there, you know, there's that fear of the unknown. She doesn't know where her mother is. She doesn't know if she'll ever be able to find her, and if she does find her, what's going to happen. And then for the C character, you know, she's kind of in this position where she wants out of her life. She doesn't know how she's going to get out. She doesn't know at what cost. And so for them, they both kind of use each other in a way at the beginning to get what they want. And then they end up sort of forming this nice little relationship amid the chaos that, of course, ends terribly. But yeah, it kind of just, for me anyway, spirals from there.
Okay, Sophia, what do your characters struggle with?
So the main character of Acid Path is one of those morally ambiguous, not so great characters, which is something that I love to read and watch because I'm like, nobody wants to follow a good guy. And so this character comes from a place of immense privilege and is doing this clinical trial because he wants to and wants something exciting to happen in his life. And when things start to happen to his close friend who's in the trial and things start to pop up on the news that are connected to the trial, instead of being like, this is fucked up, I should do something about it, he's kind of like, how close can this get? How like cool can this stuff get? And so for a character that's so self-interested, The fears that pop up recurrently are just, he's definitely a character who is, has like negative thoughts about himself and is terrified of the outside world thinking the same thing about him that he thinks about himself. And then that turns into almost like, what is it called? Where you like fulfill your own destiny just by like trying to escape it. It just becomes like
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Prophecy, yeah.
Yes, exactly. A self-fulfilling prophecy, where he thinks that he's like a shitty person because of all of these things, which makes him do all these shitty things, which makes him a shitty person. So if that answers your question in some sense.
Yeah, basically he's struggling with his own insecurities.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so what do your characters struggle with, Nadia?
Well, I mean, having it set in a pageant competition, it's pretty obvious they're all scared of losing. I mean, it's my main character is terrified that she's not going to get a entry into the pageant which is like it's basically Miss America, that she's been dreaming of since she was very small. And I had to learn a lot about how pageants work. Basically, she would have to win a smaller competition in order to get entry into the larger competition. That's like how pageants work. So she's like running out of time to like get this this pass into the big one. But yeah, it's definitely, they're all just scared of not being, I guess. I think the interesting part is that you think that it's about beauty, but it's actually about winning. And by the end, it's clear that beauty isn't really something that any of them are that attached to. It's really just triumph. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay, so what were some of the most difficult things you had to encounter when you were writing the stories?
For me, this was one of the hardest stories I've ever written. It's also one of the longest that I've ever written. So that within itself was a challenge for sure. Like when you start with an idea, you never, at least for me, you never quite know how long it could go and like necessarily where it will go. So as I was writing it, I kept going in different tangents and different ways, seeing what worked. A lot of it did not work. So there was a lot of, deleting. There was a lot of alcohol. There was a lot of wondering where I went wrong in life. But then somehow it all sort of came together. At least I hope so. And it turned into this. So yeah, definitely for me, like one of the more harder stories, just in general. And I'm still not 100% sure why, because it is not necessarily a step away from other things that I've written, but there was just something about it that was incredibly difficult to do that next step, to keep going. And so it took a while for me to actually get it done.
Okay, so what did you struggle with when writing the book, Sophia?
I feel like every time I write, it doesn't matter if it's a short story or something longer format, but every time I get to a step, I'm afraid of the next step because I feel like I've forgotten how to do it. Like if I'm outlining, I'm like, I forget how to write. I can't do this. I can't do this. And then I'll get to the writing stage and I'll be like, this is fine, actually. And then I'll look at the editing stage and be like, I forgot how to edit. This is crap. But then, like Jess said, like it all somehow manages to come together in the end every time. So I have to like give myself a little bit of grace. But it was also a difficult project because for me, like Nadia and Jess know the story, but I had written an entirely different novella that I rewrote twice. So it ended up being this like 6-month-long project where it was this very cerebral, deeply depressing story about a character who was just like very, very mentally unwell, that had like body horror elements and had to like God and religion and all these different elements that made it like very, very complex. And then it got to the point where it was in the editing phase and I was like, this is not necessarily going to work for this project on like the body horror level and like the I guess, commercial or like the audience level. And so over the course of maybe a month, I ended up writing Acid Bath, which is the novella that's in Little Mutilations. But I'd never read anything that quickly in my life, which was an interesting experience, because then you're always like, when you do something difficult, you're like, oh, I can do the thing. But it was, when it was being done, it was an experience. It was just a
Yes. State of panic, as you're right. Yeah.
exactly. Like Jess said, a lot of alcohol.
Okay, so what did you struggle with, Nadia?
So yeah, this is definitely the longest thing that, well, fictional thing that I've ever published. So that was probably the biggest thing, was just like being intimidated by the number of words that I had to get down. And I would have to just like convince myself, like, it's okay, you can do it. I promise, you just have to like hit this many a day. Like, you can do it, kind of thing. And I think with this one also, sometimes I find when I have like an idea, I may not always know the grand ending of all these things. And so I'm kind of like, I just leave it kind of vague in my like outline phase. And it's like, yeah, something big important happens. And I don't really know what that's going to be or what that's going to look like until I get closer. And it's like this like fear every time I get closer. I'm like, what is the climax exactly? Because I know like the themes that need to happen, but I don't necessarily know what happens. So it's always kind of it's like a nail biter, like, okay, am I going to be able to come up with something or not? You know, I mean, usually I do, but yeah, that was a little scary with this one. And I think the other thing I would say is just like making sure that I was giving pageant contestants like a fair depiction, because obviously it's really easy to kind of like dismiss the whole endeavor as sort of like airheady, I guess. You know, the stereotype of like the clips that go viral and stuff are always kind of like they're bloopers. But in doing a lot of research and reading, like it's a lot goes into it. And I wanted to make sure that that was depicted fairly. So it was just, I don't know if I would say I struggled with it, but it was something that I definitely was writing with that in mind.
Okay, so what were your favorite parts of the story that you wrote?
Somebody else go first while I think about this.
I love writing an ending. I don't know that it always comes first, but I'll always write the most interesting scenes to myself first, and I'm like, I'll piece it together in post. You know what I mean? Like, where I'm like, in the back of your mind, if you have a narrative thread or like a theme going, I feel like your mind almost automatically will sort together scenes.
It does, but I don't always know what it looks like, you know?
Yeah. Like it'll come over time. So you just have to like trust that your brain is like running the like app in the background almost. But I love writing where I'm like, everybody's fucked up. Like fucked up stuff is happening to them. Like, let's go to give them a little bit of trauma. Like, so that's always the funnest part for me is sprinkling a little bit of trauma and then puppeteering my little traumatized characters to do what I tell them to do.
Yeah, writing the trauma scenes, the killing scenes, they're always the most fun. Yeah.
Little trauma, little killing, never hurt anybody in fiction. Don't do it in real life. Yeah, for me, it was just being able to actually complete the story. That was probably the best part. You know, seeing that light at the end of the tunnel, like, okay, there is a way out of this. Oh my God, it has come together, but it does make sense, I hope. Like, yeah, just being able to, that little victory at the end. And I think that we probably all get that at the end of every project that we send off. It's like, oh my God, this is done. You can kind of like wash your hands of it until you have to then come back and like edit it and work on it again until you basically die at your desk. But like just being able to say that I did this and I did this well was very exciting for me.
Right.
Yeah, it's always satisfying when a difficult project suddenly comes together and actually works.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was your favorite part of writing your book, Nadia?
So I think for me, I just love writing snarky social satire type stuff. It just like gives me immense pleasure. So yeah, it was anything that was kind of like allowing me to do sort of like, miscongeniality style, like dark humor. I just like, oh, love it so much. Also, it was like, I'd said it, it's sort of in like rural-ish, area of America. I grew up in Nebraska, and anything that lets me sort of like dabble in that sort of setting, I also love. So yeah, those are like two things that I very much enjoy writing.
Okay, so do you have a favorite character from your book? And you can say no if you want.
Yeah, there's a character whose name is Mother in my story. I won't give away too many details about her. She's kind of the big bad, but kind of also not. And she can get a little nasty in it, and I love her for that. So she's probably my fave.
Okay. What about you, Nadia? Do you have a favorite character?
I mean, I think mine is my main character, Veronica, because she's so she's it reflects sort of like the darkest parts of me, like there's like a Radiohead lyric that goes like, ambition makes you look pretty ugly. That's like Veronica to a T. So I love her imperfection and like self-aware imperfection.
Okay, what about you, Sophia? Do you have a favorite character?
I don't know. Maybe the main character, his name is Luca. Definitely a little problematic, definitely a little self-indulgent. But it's always interesting to kind of like hop into those kinds of characters' minds and see what makes an antagonist tick. Like, how does someone get to this point? What created this person who would do something that's not necessarily evil, but not good either? So I always love being able to kind of creep into the minds of those kinds of characters. So it was the first time that I wrote a character that instead of being someone who's totally depressed, is just someone who's kind of an asshole. And that was kind of fun to write, honestly.
Yes, the assholes are fun to write. So I've written a few. Okay, so do you have any upcoming projects? What are you working on at the moment?
Yeah, for me, I'm co-editing an anthology called Playlist of the Damned that's on Kickstarter right now. So hop over there and pre-order the book. That'll be out next year, I believe, when we open for submissions on May 1st, which is like in a few days, which is crazy. And then, yeah, I also work as a screenwriter, so I have a couple of movie and TV projects in development, and hopefully I can announce something about The Night Belongs to Us very soon.
Ooh, we got an exclusive, sort of. Okay, so do you have anything coming up, Sophia?
I do. I am also going to be in Playlist of the Damned. So if you folks want to go over to the Kickstarter, that campaign is still open. And I have some jewelry that I made that's part of one of the tiers. It's like a little customizable silver library card. So you can put whatever book that you want to check out with the author and the date that you check it out, and I make it into a tiny pendant. And I'm also editing an anthology for Ghoulish Books that is currently open to submission. That's called Bury Your Gaze, an anthology of tragic queer horror. So if that interests you, go on the Ghoulish Books website and take a peek.
Okay. And what about you, Nadia? Any projects coming up?
So I'm also co-editing an anthology. It's really funny. Ours is called Why Didn't You Just Leave? And it's about basically people who stay in haunted houses and why they make that decision. And we're kickstarting it this summer, and we'll have a open submissions call in August. So everybody be on the lookout for that. It's through Curse Morsels Press. And other than that, you know, just writing my little horror movie reviews on Twitter. And
Which are
Instagram
great.
I love it.
that I
Yeah,
use
they're great.
as a service to the community. But yeah.
Good.
I use them all the time, Nadia. Like, should I watch this? What does Nadia have to say about it?
Nadia's
I don't always agree, but I love seeing them.
Okay, I'm going to give a little plug to my book, Fairy Tales and Nightmares, which is going to be coming out at the end of the year. So look for that as well. And I'm going to let you all now give your little outros and tell everybody where they can find you in your books. So Jess, you start.
You can find me on the internet, which is where we are now, at jesslandry.com, or I'm on social media at jesslandry28.
Okay, Sophia?
I am also trapped in the internet realm. Help, God. I'm trapped in the Twitter realm.
Yeah.
At ampersands Sophia Ashram. And that's the main social media platform that I use. Come join me in hell.
Okay, Nadia. Where can they find you?
So yeah, NadiaBulkin.com was where I track like stories and random blog posts. And on Twitter, I'm just my name, Nadia Bulkin, and Instagram. Advantage of having a unique combination of names, so you can just be your first and last name.
Okay, so thank you all for being our guests today. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and that's it for this Little Mutilations Dark Tides #7 interview. So join us next month when we have another interview with the Crystal Lake Publishing authors. So bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.